Wyoming Territory, 1883. The wind tore across the flats as Rosa Morales collapsed in the thinning snow. Her 3 newborn daughters pressed to her chest like the last scraps of life she could protect. Behind her lay the hoofprints of the men who'd abandoned her in the dark, just as the church and the whole town had cast her out long before tonight. One of the babies stopped crying, and Rosa's shaking hands fumbled desperately to wake her. If my girls die out here, then maybe no one ever wanted us alive in the first place, she thought, a hollow ache splitting through her. She forced her head up and saw a single lantern swaying in the night, carried by a lone rider who might be hope, or the end. Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, leave your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Rosa woke to the sound of a baby crying. Not sharp, not loud, just the thin, exhausted whimper of a newborn who didn't know yet if the world wanted her alive. For a moment, Rosa didn't either. Pain arrived first. A deep, dragging ache in her ribs, the sting along her wrists, the burn in her throat, then the smell, straw, smoke, old wood. Not the desert, not the fence post, not the icy wind that had cut through her bones. She forced her eyes open. A cabin, low ceiling, timber walls, a stove in the corner giving off a faint warmth. And a man. He sat in a wooden chair beside her, a baby balanced in one arm and a bottle in the other. Big hands, slow movements, like he handled tiny newborns every day. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, showing old scars and a strength that looked carved rather than built. He lifted his eyes to her, gray and unreadable. "You're awake," he said, voice low and rough with disuse. "Good." Rosa's heart jumped, panic flaring. She tried to sit up, but pain pinned her back down to the thin mattress. "My girls!" Her voice cracked. "Where are they?" "Right there." He tipped his head toward the foot of the bed. In a feed trough lined with blankets, 2 small bundles lay close together. One stirred, the other slept. Tiny chests rose and fell, slow but steady. Her babies. Her hand flew to her mouth, trying to hold in the cry that escaped anyway. The man didn't react much, just kept feeding the one he held. "Isabel," Rosa whispered. "Lucia, Marisol?" "Pretty names," he murmured. Didn't know which was which. Been calling him the loud one, the hungry one, and the other one. Despite her fear, a weak breath of laughter escaped her. He nodded toward the baby in his arms. "This one's hungry." "That's Isabel," she said. He repeated the name under his breath, like he was making room for it somewhere inside him. "Isabel." Rosa's eyes filled with tears again. You saved us?" His jaw tightened. "Found you. Half dead. Didn't feel like leaving you that way." "Why?" she whispered. She had to ask. Kindness always came with a cost. Always. But the man only shrugged a single shoulder, as if the answer embarrassed him. "Because it was wrong," he said simply. Before she could ask more, another voice cut through the cabin from the open door. "Mr. Hart, folks down in town hear you brought some Mexican woman and her whole mess of babies up here. They'll—" "Cole," the man snapped, not raising his voice, but stopping the boy cold. "You say one more word like that, you can take your horse and keep riding." A muttered curse, footsteps in the dirt, then silence. Rosa flinched, shame tightening in her chest. She'd heard all those insults before, every version of less than, burden, mistake. Nothing new. But for the first time, somebody shut it down for her. No hesitation. No excuses. The man, Eli Hart, set the bottle aside and lifted Isabel against his shoulder, patting her back with one steady hand. "You're safe here," he said, almost gruff. "Long as you're under my roof." Rosa swallowed hard. Safe. She didn't remember what that felt like. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," he said too quickly. "Just rest." She blinked at him. "I don't know who you are." "Eli," he said. "Eli Hart. This is Hart's Hollow Ranch." He glanced toward the door. "I don't get many visitors." "You shouldn't have brought trouble here," she whispered, staring at her hands. "Me and the girls. We're trouble everywhere we go." "No," Eli said, and there was iron in that single word. "You're not." He walked to the wall, took down a battered iron lantern, its frame bent, glass smudged, and set it on the small table beside her. He struck a match. The wick caught with a small, brave flame. Warm light filled the corner of the cabin, coating everything in gold. The trough, the babies, the bruises on Rosa's face, the lines at the corners of Eli's eyes. "When that lantern's lit," he said, "this place means safety. That's the rule here." Rosa stared at the glow. Her throat tightened. "No one ever kept a light burning for me?" she whispered. Eli looked at her, and for the first time, something soft moved in his eyes. Something like recognition, like he knew that loneliness by heart. "Well," he said quietly, "then it's about damn time someone did." Rosa felt herself finally slipping, exhaustion pulling her down. But before sleep took her, she whispered one last thing. "My girls," she said. "Please don't let them be alone." "They won't be," Eli answered. "Not while I'm breathing." The lantern burned steady beside her. And for the first time in a long, long while, Rosa Morales fell asleep knowing someone meant it. By nightfall, Rosa was slipping in and out of herself. The fever came gently at first, just a trembling in her fingers, a shiver down her spine. But soon it crawled higher, burning through bruises and bone. Sweat gathered on her brow, then chilled her skin until she shook. Eli Hart noticed before she said a word. He knelt beside the bed, touched the back of his knuckles to her temple, and swore under his breath. "You're burning up." Rosa tried to answer, but her words tangled together, melted into air. The babies slept restlessly in the trough, whimpering like they could feel the heat rolling off their mother. Eli moved fast. For a man who usually did everything slow, he dipped a cloth in cool water from the bucket, wrung it out, and pressed it to Rosa's forehead. She flinched, then sighed, eyes fluttering. She drifted, her thoughts blurred, shapes dissolved. Then the memories came. A wooden floor beneath her knees, her hair pulled tight, a preacher's voice booming above her head. A womb that brings forth only burden, a wife who cannot give a man a son, shame upon shame. A crowd murmuring, women shaking their heads, the sound of someone spitting on the ground beside her. Rosa whimpered, twisting. Eli leaned closer. "Rosa? Hey, you're here. Not there." But she didn't hear him. The fever dragged her deeper. She saw Mateo, her older brother, laughing by the river, tossing pebbles across the water. His smile was soft, always soft, too soft for this world. Then she saw him underground, in the Moja, his hands bleeding, the walls groaning above him, and she heard the preacher again. 3 girls, a curse, God's judgment. Rosa cried out, "Please don't take them from me." Eli's jaw locked. something sharp flickering in his eyes. He dipped the cloth again, smoothed it over her arms and neck, whispering only, "You're safe. They're safe. No one's taken nothing." But the fever had its claws in her. In her delirium, Rosa's voice cracked open with memories she'd buried deep. "They made me stand there, said I was wicked, told him to cast me out. Mateo, Mateo." Eli froze. He hadn't heard that name spoken in 5 years. Not since the night everything went wrong. The lantern beside the bed flickered, throwing shadows across Eli's face. He sat back slowly, breath caught halfway between guilt and dread. And the flashback hit him. It was winter. 5 years ago. He'd ridden for Sterling Briggs then, young, hungry, stupid enough to think loyalty would buy him a place in the world. He remembered following Briggs onto the Morales land, the old well, the dry creek bed, Rosa's father pleading with Briggs about water rights. Mateo had stood there too, quiet, protective, placing himself between Briggs and his family. Briggs had smiled that smooth serpent smile. "Sign it, Morales, or I'll find another way to get what's mine." Eli had held the lantern, just held it. That's all he'd done. He told himself it meant he wasn't part of anything. Then the M.O. jaw had collapsed a week later. Mateo never walked out. Briggs paid Eli extra to sign a statement about poor footing and unfortunate timing. Eli took the money, and he'd been regretting it ever since. Back in the cabin, Rosa's breathing hitched, dragging him out of the memory. Her voice was thin, fracturing. "Mateo, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Eli swallowed hard. A knot rose in his throat like a stone. "You don't owe the world apologies," he said. "Least of all for being left behind by men who should have stood with you." She whimpered again, thrashing weakly. He steadied her with both hands. "You're safe," he repeated, softer this time. "I've got you. I'm not leaving." The babies stirred at the sound of their mother's voice. One of them, Marisol, let out a sharp cry. Eli lifted her from the trough, settling her against his chest. She was warm now, not dangerously cold like earlier, but scared. Hungry. "All right," he murmured, shifting her small body to one arm while reaching for the milk jug with the other. "I hear you." He fed her slowly, working the cloth-wrapped spout between her tiny lips until she latched on. As she drank, her cry softened. Eli glanced at Rosa. Her eyes fluttered open for a heartbeat, hazy and unfocused. When she saw him holding her baby, something inside her eased, the faintest, fragile peace crossing her fever-flushed face. "You stayed," she breathed. "Yeah," he said. "I did." She tried to raise a hand toward her daughters but couldn't. Her arm fell limply back onto the blanket. Eli leaned in, lifting her hand gently and placing it over her own chest. "Rest," he said. "You did enough. You got him here alive. Let me take the next shift." Her lips trembled. A single tear slid down her temple. Then her eyes closed. The fever pulled her under again, but not as violently as before. Her breathing slowed, steadied. Eli fed each baby in turn, tucking them close together afterward so they slept with their tiny bodies touching. He checked Rosa's temperature, changed the cloth, kept watch. Hours passed. Finally, somewhere close to dawn, Rosa let out a weak sigh and stilled. The fever hadn't broken, but it loosened its grip. Eli leaned back in his chair, exhaustion weighing on him, lantern light circling his shadow on the wall. He looked at Rosa, bruised, burning, but holding on with the stubbornness of a woman who'd had everything taken and still refused to let go. "I won't fail you," he whispered to the dark. "Not again. Not this time." The lantern flickered. Rosa slept, and outside, the first gray light of morning reached across Heart's Hollow, carrying the faintest promise that maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed. Morning settled softly over Heart's Hollow, the kind of morning that tried its best to pretend nothing bad had ever happened in the world. Rosa woke to the faint crackle of a stove fire, the smell of coffee, and, strangest of all, 3 babies giggling. Not crying, not shivering, actually giggling. She blinked herself upright, sore everywhere, but clearer than she'd been in days. Across the room, Eli Hart sat on the floor, legs crossed, letting little Isabel tug on the end of his sleeve while Lucia slapped her palms against his boot, and Marisol gnawed determinedly on a leather strap. "What? What are you doing?" Rosa asked, her voice a croaking whisper. Eli didn't look up, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "Keeping them occupied. Otherwise they get ideas. Dangerous ones." Rosa felt something inside her crack. Just a small crack, right through the hardest part of her chest. A warmth she didn't trust. "They're laughing," she murmured. "Babies do that sometimes," he said. "Not mine," she breathed. Eli finally glanced at her. His expression wasn't pity. It wasn't even softness. It was something steadier, like he was memorizing the fact that she was sitting up, breathing, alive. "You ain't where you were before," he told her. "This place ain't perfect, but you're safe enough to hear a laugh." She swallowed, unable to speak. Before she could find words, a sharp whistle cut through the yard. A horse. Hooves. Voices. Eli stood instantly, instinct tightening every muscle in his body. "Stay with the girls." He stepped out onto the porch, hand resting near the rifle propped beside the door, though he didn't grab it yet. Moments later, a crisp, familiar voice called, "Put that gun down, Eli Hart. If I wanted you dead, I'd have come up the ridge last night." Rosa stiffened. A woman walked into the doorway, a tall figure wrapped in a wool coat, gun belt snug on her hips, badge glinting in the cold light. Sheriff May Collins. Her presence filled the room as soon as she stepped inside. Not loud, not harsh, just there. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to take control. May nodded once at Rosa. "Mornin'. Heard you nearly died." Rosa dipped her head politely, unsure whether to fear her or trust her. May set a small cloth bundle on the table. "Brought coffee beans, oat cakes, and something sweet for the little ones. Don't go getting used to it. I ain't running a charity." Eli snorted. "You walked 6 miles in the cold for folks you don't know." "I'd call that something, Sheriff." May ignored the comment and turned to Rosa with a sharp, assessing look. Not judgmental, but calculating, trying to understand her. "You Rosa Morales?" Rosa's throat tightened. She held her babies closer. "Yes, ma'am." May drew in a breath. "Then you ought to know. Briggs is spreading talk down in town." The warmth in the room evaporated. Rosa's fingers dug into the blanket. Eli's jaw locked. "What kind of talk?" he asked. May sighed, sat down, and scrubbed a hand over her face. Claims Rosa ran off in a hysteric fit. Says she's not right in the head. Says she's hiding these girls from him in the church. That the babies are his property by law. Rosa flinched so violently her teeth clacked. "No," she whispered. "No, he can't." "He can," May cut in grimly. "At least enough to make noise. Folks are listening." Eli stepped forward. What else? That's the part you ain't gonna like. May leaned back in her chair, boot tapping lightly against the floorboards. Briggs has men riding around saying they're out to retrieve a mother gone astray. Eli cursed under his breath. May lowered her voice. And down at the saloon last night, a couple of ranch hands made comments about those girls. Real ugly ones. Something about 3 little half-breeds bringing sin into the county. Rosa's breath hitched. The room spun a little. Her past wasn't behind her. It was riding up the mountain. Eli moved without thinking, one step closer, then another, until he stood between her and the open doorway, like a man bracing against a storm. No one's taken them, he said. Not while I have breath in my body. May raised a brow. You sure? Because Briggs ain't the type to knock politely. I'm sure. There was no hesitation, no tremor. Rosa stared at him. Something warm tried to rise again. She pushed it down. She'd trusted a man once. Look what it cost. May looked between the two of them, measuring something invisible. You should prepare, she warned. Briggs has the law in his pocket, or thinks he does. Eli's expression hardened, shadows gathering behind his eyes. He ain't taken her, or the girls. May lifted both palms. I didn't say he would, but he's coming, and he's bringing more than words. Silence thickened. Rosa felt the babies shift restlessly against her chest, as if sensing the tension. May softened, barely. Rest while you can. Today's quiet. Tomorrow might not be. She tipped her hat, stepped outside, and rode off down the ridge. The cabin seemed smaller after she left. The world seemed heavier. Rosa closed her eyes. Eli, she whispered, they're never going to leave me alone. He knelt in front of her, so she had no choice but to look at him. Maybe not, he said, but you ain't facing 'em alone anymore. And for the first time in a long, long while, Rosa wasn't sure whether to fear hope or hold it. By mid-afternoon, clouds gathered low over Heart's Hollow. Heavy, gray, silent in that way storms get when they're deciding just how cruel they plan to be. Rosa felt the pressure in her bones before she heard the hooves. She was sorting through blankets by the hearth, babies tucked nearby on a thick rug Eli had laid out, when a deep rumble rolled through the ground. Not thunder. Horses. Several. Her blood froze. Eli was on the porch before she had time to stand. She heard the scrape of his boots, the low curse he tried to swallow, the way silence wrapped around the ranch like a noose. Rosa scooped up the girls and crept toward the doorway. Then she saw them. Sterling Briggs, dressed in his city-clean coat and smugness like armor, sat tall on a bay gelding. 2 hired guns flanked him, broad shoulders, dead eyes, hands resting too casually on the butts of their revolvers. Briggs smiled as if arriving for afternoon tea. Eli Hart, he said, voice smooth as snake oil. Thought I'd drop by. See how my favorite mountain hermit's holding up. Eli stepped down one stair, posture calm but coiled. State your business. Oh, it's simple. Briggs slid off his horse with the ease of a man who believed the entire county existed for his convenience. He pulled a stack of papers from his coat and slapped them into Eli's chest. Your business, actually. Eli didn't look at the papers. Rosa did. Even from the doorway, she recognized the county seal, the neat columns, the numbers, debt. Briggs clicked his tongue. Late on your irrigation fees, behind on property tax, still owe me for the winter feed shipment you begged for in December. He raised a brow. You must be getting desperate up here, Eli's jaw flexed. I paid what I could. That's the thing. What you could ain't enough. Briggs took one slow step forward. Lucky for you, I'm a reasonable man. I'm offering a way out. Rosa's stomach twisted. Eli didn't move. Spit it out. Briggs gestured lazily toward the cabin. Give me the woman and the girls. They're wanted back in town. Caused a bit of unrest. Rosa's nails dug into the baby's blankets so hard they nearly tore. Briggs went on, too pleased with himself. You hand 'em over, I wipe your debts. Guarantee your water allotment through summer. Hell, I might even throw in that second windmill you've been eyeing. One of the hired guns smirked. Generous offer, boss. Sure is, Briggs agreed. Eli didn't answer. His silence stretched, and in it, Rosa felt something cold crawl up her spine. Then Briggs leaned in, lowering his voice just enough. Let's not pretend you're acting on principle. You used to ride for me, Hart. You know how things work in this county. Sometimes a man's got to choose what keeps his land alive. Rosa stiffened. Used to ride for him? She'd suspected, but hearing it aloud cracked something fragile between her ribs. Briggs smiled wider, catching the shift in her face. Oh, she didn't know. Guess you keep secrets just as well as I do. Eli's control snapped like a dry twig. You best watch your mouth. Briggs shrugged. Truth ain't something you can punch your way out of. Then he turned to Rosa directly, for the first time, eyes raking over her like a ledger. You should be back where you belong, girl. Yelling at church doors won't change the blood in your veins. A Mexican woman with 3 fatherless girls? That's a burden, not a blessing. He smiled sweetly. Hand 'em over, Hart. Let the law deal with undesirables. The words hit her like a physical blow. Rosa choked on air, her vision blurred. Isabel whimpered against her chest. Before anyone could blink, Eli moved. One clean, furious punch. His fist cracked across Briggs's jaw so hard the man staggered sideways, boots sliding in the dirt. The hired guns jerked forward, hands flying to their holsters. Rosa gasped. But Eli didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need one. His voice dropped into something low, lethal, and carved from pure conviction. You don't speak over women in this house, he said. You don't touch what ain't yours. And you damn sure don't point the word undesirable at children who ain't old enough to walk. Briggs wiped blood from his lip, laughing breathlessly. So that's your answer. Eli stepped closer, not with rage, but with something stronger. A line drawn. A man deciding what side of his own soul he planned to live on. My answer, Eli said, is this. Out here, a man ain't what he's paid to do. He's what he stands in front of when bullets fly. The hired guns tensed. But Briggs lifted a hand to stop them. His eyes burned hatred, and something worse. Certainty. You'll regret that, Hart. He gathered his papers, snapped them back into his coat, and mounted the horse with stiff, furious movements. You're one drought away from begging, he spat. Let's see if your new guests keep you warm when the water runs out. He snapped the reins and rode off. The hired guns followed. Silence fell heavy behind them. Rosa stood in the doorway, shaking. Eli finally turned. Their eyes met, and in one shared heartbeat, Rosa realized. He didn't deny riding for Briggs. He didn't explain. He didn't soften the truth. And a crack formed in the fragile trust she'd begun to build. Not a break. Not yet. But a crack wide enough for everything ahead to slip through. Rosa, he said quietly, stepping toward her. She backed away before she meant to. Eli's face fell, just barely, but enough. He opened his mouth, searching for words. No words came. Because some storms don't start with thunder. They start with silence. And the silence between them was suddenly louder than hooves, louder than Briggs's threats, louder than anything the mountain wind could carry. Sunday should have been quiet. It should have been a day of rest, or at least a day when the world pretended to have manners. But mid-morning, Rosa heard them before she saw them. Voices, dozens of them, echoing up the ridge. Not shouting, worse, laughing, chatting, like they were headed to a picnic instead of a man's ranch. Eli stepped outside first. Rosa followed to the doorway with the babies in her arms, heart thundering. A line of townsfolk wound up the mountain road, women in stiff church dresses, men smelling of whiskey, though it wasn't even noon, children tagging behind like they'd been promised a spectacle. Sheriff May had warned them, but Rosa wasn't prepared for this. At the front was Mrs. Alderton, round-faced, hard-eyed, the same woman who years ago stood in the front pew and shouted, "Amen," when Rosa was cast out of her church. Rosa's arms tightened around the babies. Eli moved down from the porch to meet the crowd. His voice stayed even. "State your business." Mrs. Alderton folded her hands like she was about to kneel in prayer. "We came to check on the situation." Her gaze slid toward Rosa like an oily stain. "There's talk in town, Mr. Hart. They say you're harboring a woman who ran from her husband, hiding 3 children that ain't hers to keep." Rosa felt the words like hands around her throat. Eli didn't budge. "They're not Briggs to take." "But they're not yours either," a man chimed in. "And folks don't like trouble hiding up in the hills where we can't see it." "We just want to look at 'em," another woman said, as if inspecting livestock. "See if the rumors are true. 3 little girl babies with," she lowered her voice, "dark hair." Rosa's vision shimmered with humiliation. Her cheeks burned, the laughter, the pointing, the same sick curiosity she'd known all her life. A woman with 3 girls? A woman whose husband left? A woman whose brother died in the mines? Trash to them. A lesson to their daughters. A joke to their sons. Eli's shoulders stiffened. "Get off my land." Mrs. Alderton sniffed. "Oh, we're not here to fight, Mr. Hart. We simply believe the Lord's house should know what's happening on this mountain. If a woman is living in sin—" Rosa stepped out before she knew she was moving. Her voice trembled, but it carried. "My sin was giving birth to daughters?" A ripple of discomfort moved through the group. Mrs. Alderton lifted her chin. "Your sin was refusing to repent. A husband's roof is a woman's rightful place, not some bachelor's cabin." Rosa flinched. Eli moved to stand beside her, not touching her, but close enough her shoulder brushed his coat. "That's enough." But the crowd had momentum. A tall ranch hand, someone Eli had once hired for a season, spoke up. "This ain't about the woman. This is about you, Hart. Folks don't like standing next to a man whose past is muddy." Eli stiffened. The man shrugged. "Heard you work for Briggs. Heard you sign things a decent man wouldn't." Rosa's heart cracked. So the town knew. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to poison the air. Then, as if to drive the knife in deeper, Cole, the young hand Eli had been trying to train, stepped from the back of the crowd. "Eli, I'm quitting." Eli blinked. "What?" Cole shifted nervously. "I got family in town. Folks talking. They say you're taking sides against the county. Protecting them." His gaze flicked to Rosa. "Ain't worth losing my job every spring because I'm tied to your mess." Eli stared at him, quiet, stunned. It was a kind of betrayal Rosa recognized instantly. The kind that didn't come with a slap or a shout. The kind that came with silence and a turned back. Cole swallowed. Sorry, but Hearts Hollow's got too much heat on it. I'm out. He walked away. Others nodded in agreement. A few muttered about pulling their cattle or taking business elsewhere. Piece by piece, Eli's support, the very thin net he had, began to unravel. Rosa felt the sting of guilt. Deep, nauseating. She whispered, "This is my fault." Eli whipped his head toward her. "No, Rosa." But she couldn't stop it. "They came because of me. Because I'm—" He stepped in front of her, voice low and fierce. "They came because they're cowards looking for someone weaker to blame." Mrs. Alderton gasped. "How dare you?" Eli didn't spare her a glance. "Every last one of you, off my property before I decide to show you how dare I." Some men bristled, but something in Eli's eyes, tired, haunted, but razor-sharp, made the whole group step back. One by one, they retreated down the ridge, muttering as they went, but leaving all the same. Silence dropped like a stone. Rosa sagged against the doorframe, trembling with shame. Eli stood in the yard, fists clenched, watching the last hat disappear around the bend. Only when the mountain was quiet again did he finally speak. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "You shouldn't have had to see that." Rosa swallowed, throat raw. They were right about one thing. Eli stiffened. "I bring trouble." He turned slowly. "You bring 3 little girls who deserve better than this place, better than this county, better than Briggs." Rosa shook her head. "You're losing everything because of us." "Then it's a price I choose." Something inside her twisted painfully, part awe, part fear. But trust? Trust was slipping. Something fragile cracked deeper, and far below in the valley, Redemption Gulch buzzed with new rumors, ready to climb the mountain again. The pieces were shifting. Something was coming, and Rosa could feel the first real fracture forming between her and the only man who'd stood between her babies and the world. The storm rolled in without warning. Not a gentle mountain drizzle, but a hard, relentless downpour that battered Hearts Hollow like it meant to wash the whole ranch off the map. Rosa tried to soothe the babies, but each crack of thunder made Lucia cry harder. She cradled all 3 in her lap, rocking them, whispering old Spanish lullabies her mother sang before life turned cruel. Eli was stoking the fire, shoulders tense, jaw locked, pretending the storm didn't bother him. But Rosa noticed his hands, steady in a gunfight, steady under pressure, trembling. He wasn't afraid of weather. He was afraid of losing control, afraid of the thing unspoken between them. Then, a pounding on the door. Eli rose instantly, rifle in hand, moving silent as a wolf. Rosa held her breath. Lightning flashed, illuminating the window, and outside stood Sheriff May Collins, soaked to the bone, clutching a leather satchel. Eli opened the door. "May, hell happened to you?" May pushed past him, dripping onto the floor. "Briggs happened." She dropped the satchel on the table with a wet slap. Rosa felt the hair on her arms rise. May looked from her to Eli, expression grim. "I shouldn't be bringing this. But if I don't, Briggs will use it first, and he'll twist it until the devil himself blushes." Eli froze. "May, what is that?" "His files," she said. "Debt ledgers, land claims, mine reports." Eli closed his eyes. "May." "I know," May cut in. "But you need to see what he plans to use against you. And Rosa, I think you need to see something too. Rosa's heartbeat turned uneven. May loosened the straps and pulled out a stack of papers. Some typed, many handwritten, all stamped with Briggs' business seal. A single sheet slid free and landed face up. Rosa saw the name instantly. Mateo Morales, her brother. Her throat constricted. Hands shaking, she reached for the page, but Eli snatched it first. Too late. Her eyes already saw the words. Witness signature, Eli Hart. Cause of death, mining accident due to structural failure. Report, conditions satisfactory. No negligence detected. Rosa's blood iced over. No, 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 no. She grabbed the page from Eli's hand. This is a lie. May's voice softened. It is. Rosa looked at Eli. His face was gray, hollowed, like someone punched the air out of him. Tell me it's not your signature, she whispered. Eli swallowed, throat tight. Rosa, let me explain. She shook her head violently. Tell me it's not your signature. It is. The room spun. Rosa stepped back, clutching the paper so hard it wrinkled. You lied to me. Her voice cracked. You lied this whole time. I never lied, he said quickly. I just didn't tell you, and I should have. I know that. You signed off on my brother's death. Her scream tore out of her chest before she could stop it. The baby startled, crying. Thunder boomed behind her. Eli's eyes glistened. Rosa, I was a coward. Briggs paid me to say it was an accident. I was young and broke and stupid. You stood there, she sobbed. You stood there with a lantern while Mateo died in the dark. Eli's breath hitched like she'd stabbed him. May looked away, giving them the dignity of not staring at the unraveling of two souls. I tried to walk away, Eli whispered. But I didn't. I didn't. And I have regretted it every day since. Saving you out in that desert, it wasn't some hero thing. It was me trying to... To what? Rosa snapped. To balance the scales? To wash the stain off your hands? To feel like a good man again? Eli flinched. Rosa felt something inside her shatter, sharp and final. She gathered her babies, wrapping them tight in blankets. Her movements were jerky, frantic. Eli stepped toward her. Rosa, please, don't. Her voice had gone quiet. Too quiet. I can't stay here. Not under the roof of the man who helped bury my brother. Lightning lit up her face, wet with tears, wild with grief. Eli looked like she'd carved him open. Let me make it right, he begged. Take everything I have. Take the ranch. Take the water. Just don't walk out into that storm. Rosa shook her head. I'd rather die in rain than live in a lie. She turned for the door. Eli moved instinctively, reaching out, not to grab her, to stop her without touching. Rosa, he said, voice breaking for the first time. Don't take the babies out there, please. Thunder cracked outside like the world splitting. Rosa paused, only for a breath. Then she blew out the lantern on the table. The last light in the room died. A symbolic death. A promise undone. A refuge extinguished. Eli staggered back like the darkness itself punched him. Rosa opened the door. Wind tore inside, cold and violent. May whispered, Rosa, wait. But Rosa stepped into the storm. Babies pressed against her chest, skirts whipping in the wind. Her silhouette vanished into sheets of rain. The door slammed behind her, and Eli stood alone in the dark cabin, the extinguished lantern at his feet, fighting for breath that wouldn't come. The storm outside had nothing on the one ripping through his chest. And the truth? There was no going back. Not now. Not after this. The rain didn't ease. It beat down on Rosa like punishment, soaking through her dress, chilling her skin until she couldn't tell which trembling came from cold and which from heartbreak. But she walked. One step, then another. 3 babies clutched tight against her chest and back, little bodies crying, then whimpering, then going terrifyingly quiet against her. She kissed their wet heads again and again. "Mama's here," she whispered in Spanish. "I've got you. I won't let them bury us in silence. Not this time." Her tears mixed with the storm. Behind her, Heart's Hollow faded, its outline swallowed by darkness and the rising fog off the ridge. She didn't look back. Couldn't. If she turned even once, she feared her knees would give in. Eli's voice still echoed inside her skull. "I was a coward. I was young. I've regretted it every day since." Regret didn't bring Mateo back. Regret didn't erase a signature. Regret didn't change the fact that she'd trusted another man who had once stood by while her family was destroyed. Yet, she couldn't scrub away the other voice either. "No one's taken them. Not while I have breath in my body." Why did the same man carry both truths? Why did that hurt the most? A crack of lightning shook the sky. Rosa gasped, tightening her grip around Lucia, who clung to her shawl with tiny fists. The path down the ridge blurred in the rain. Mud sucked at her boots. But she didn't stop. Not until she reached the flat, abandoned line of the old railway. The storm broke slightly here, the canyon walls shielding her from the worst of it. Her breaths came shallow, ragged. Then, a wagon approached. A man under a tarp leaned out. "Señora, you'll die out here. I can take you down for a price." Rosa stiffened instantly. A price. Always a price for women like her. Her jaw locked. "No. You got 3 babies. Storm's gonna drown them." I said no. He stared, startled by the steel in her voice. Rosa stepped off the tracks, putting herself between the wagon and her daughters. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply stood her ground. The man muttered a curse, snapped the reins, and drove on, away from the small woman who'd somehow looked larger than the storm around her. For the first time in days, Rosa felt something new stir in her chest. A spine, a fire, a refusal to be owned. She started walking again. Hours later, soaked, exhausted, barely breathing, she reached the blinking lantern lights at the edge of Redemption Gulch. Rainwater streamed down the muddy street. A few men lingered under the saloon awning, laughing, until they saw her. Silence spread. Whispers followed. "Holy hell, that's her. The Morales girl. That's the one Briggs. Thought she died out there. Look at them kids. 3 little mesquite thorns." Rosa kept walking. Every word stung, but not enough to stop. Her this time. She passed the church. The double doors were open for evening prayer. The same preacher who once held her by the wrist and shamed her froze mid-sermon as he saw her ghost-like figure dripping on the threshold. His eyes widened in something between fear and outrage. Rosa stepped inside far enough for her voice to carry. "You prayed for my shame," she said quietly. "I survived it." Then she turned and walked away, while murmurs rippled across the pews. Let them choke on witnessing the woman they tried to erase. Her legs nearly buckled as she reached the sheriff's office, but she forced herself to stand straight. Sheriff May looked up from her desk, shocked. "Rosa? Lord above, you walked here in this storm?" Rosa nodded. "Where's Eli?" Rosa's voice came out sharp, brittle. "Not important." May stood, taking in the sight. 3 babies bundled against her. Rosa shaking from cold and emotion more than rain. "What are you doing here, honey?" Rosa swallowed the tremor in her throat. "If you need to arrest me," she said, "do it. But do it where everyone can see. I won't hide. I won't let Briggs drag me into some back room and rewrite the story again." May blinked. "You want this public?" "I want the truth public." It was the first time Rosa said truth without fear. Something in May's face changed. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Two women who had both learned the hard way how men twist silence. May grabbed her hat. "All right. If we're doing this, we're doing it proper." She stepped into the rain with Rosa, leading her across the square toward the courthouse steps where Briggs liked to perform his righteousness for the town. Rosa's knees trembled, but she didn't stop. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't walking away from shame. She was walking toward justice. Every window flickered with lamplight as faces appeared behind glass. People nudged each other awake. Doors opened, crowds trickled out. Rosa felt the eyes, the whispers, the judgments. She didn't bow her head. May cleared her throat. "You sure?" she asked softly. Rosa shifted her daughters in her arms and lifted her chin. "I'm sure." May gave a small nod. "Then let's wake this town up." Together they climbed the courthouse steps. Rosa soaked, trembling but unbroken, and waited for the town to gather. Somewhere far up the mountain, a rancher named Eli Hart felt a pull in his chest he couldn't explain. Something in him broke open in the storm. He didn't know yet. But Rosa Morales had just set the match that would burn all the lies down. Redemption Gulch woke like a rattlesnake kicked out of sunsleep. Within minutes, lanterns flared to life along the muddy street. Doors opened, people poured out, men tugging on boots, women clutching shawls, children rubbing sleep from their eyes as they climbed onto crates for a better view. And on the courthouse steps, Rosa Morales stood soaked through, 3 babies bundled against her chest and back. Every muscle trembled from cold, terror, and something fiercer. Sheriff May stood beside her, arms folded, jaw set like granite. Then, from the opposite end of the square, Sterling Briggs arrived. He wasn't dressed for a storm. He wore his Sunday coat, his polished boots, his righteousness sharpened to a deadly point. 2 deputies, his deputies, not May's, followed behind like obedient shadows. He lifted both arms as if greeting the crowd at a revival. "Well, look here," he boomed, voice dripping with manufactured pity. "The distraught mother returns. Praise the Lord." A ripple went through the crowd. Rosa's stomach knotted. Briggs mounted the first step, stopping 3 feet below her. "Sheriff Collins, thank you for detaining this woman. I'll take the infants now and return them to a place of moral safety." May didn't move. "Sheriff's jurisdiction runs through this whole county, Briggs. Last I checked, that badge ain't on your chest." He smiled. "The town council thinks otherwise." A murmur rose behind him. He had supporters here. Plenty. Then Briggs faced the crowd. "Good people of Redemption Gulch," he announced. "A mother stands here accused of abandoning her husband, slandering her church, and endangering 3 innocent children. She..." Rosa's voice cut through the rain like a whip. "I never abandoned anyone." The crowd flinched in surprise. Rosa didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice carried because truth carried. She stepped forward. Her legs shook, but her spine held. "I was cast out by the same church that now pretends to care for my daughters. I was told I brought shame by giving birth to girls. My husband left me, The pastor condemned me, and the people here, her gaze swept over them, watched. An uncomfortable shift rippled through the audience. Some lowered their eyes. Briggs cleared his throat loudly. Now let's not have any hysterics. Hysterics, Rosa snapped. You tied my brother to a wage that killed him, and then you hunted my daughters like they were property. The crowd gasped. May's hand moved subtly to her gun. Briggs's expression tightened, cracks appearing in the polished exterior. Child, he said coldly, you tread on dangerous ground. Rosa stepped down one stair. Her babies whimpered, but she held them with a strength she didn't know she possessed. If the ground is dangerous, it's because you poisoned it. Briggs snapped. Enough! He rounded on the crowd. This woman is delusional. Her husband has given statements. Her church has records. Her behavior proves. But he never finished the sentence, because a fresh set of hoofbeats thundered into the square. People turned, lanterns swayed, and out of the rain, riding hard, came Eli Hart. He didn't carry a gun, didn't wear a coat. He was drenched, bleeding from a cut at his temple, clearly fell or collided with something on the way down. But he didn't slow. He swung off his horse before it stopped moving. Rosa's heart lurched painfully. Eli walked straight to the courthouse steps, stopping between her and Briggs. He didn't look at her yet. His eyes locked onto the crowd, onto every face, every sneer, every half-formed judgment. And in the rain-thickened silence, Eli spoke. If y'all want to hang someone? His voice was roughened by cold emotion and something deeper. Hang me. The crowd went dead still. Briggs sputtered. What on earth are you babbling about, Hart? Eli looked Rosa's direction, just long enough for her to see the apology burning behind his eyes, then turned back to the town. I'm the one who signed the mine report, he said. Mateo Morales didn't die in an accident. The conditions were unsafe. Briggs pushed the shifts longer than the supports could hold. He knew it. I knew it. And I still signed my name for a handful of dollars and a place to sleep. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Briggs's face drained of color. Eli continued, louder, stronger now that he had pulled the rot into the light. I didn't climb into that mine to pull Mateo out. I didn't run to the sheriff. I didn't do a damn thing except watch a good family break. He tapped his chest with 2 fingers. My shame. Mine. Rosa's knees almost buckled. Eli turned fully toward the crowd, rain streaming down his face like penance. If you're looking for evil, don't look at a mother who kept her girls alive. Look at the men who profit from silence. Look at the ones who steal water and land and call it God's will. Briggs snarled. Arrest him. May lifted her chin. On what charge? He's confessing. Confessing to lies, Briggs shouted. Eli pointed straight at him. No lies here tonight. Only truth. Truth about you, truth about me, and truth about the woman you chased into the desert to die. Gasps, whispers. Then, Rosa felt something shift in the crowd. Not yet support, but uncertainty, a crack in Briggs' wall of influence. Briggs's voice rose an octave. He's a criminal, a drunk, a has-been. Didn't you people hear what he said? He admitted guilt. He's the problem, not me. Eli stepped up one stair, eyes hard. I'm guilty of cowardice, but you, Sterling Briggs, are guilty of murder. The word hit like a hammer. Gasps, cries. Someone crossed themselves. Briggs's face twisted from arrogance to something feral. You'll pay for that, he hissed. Eli didn't flinch. I already have. Then he looked at Rosa, really looked at her, for the first time since she left the ranch. "Whatever you decide after tonight," he said softly, almost drowned by rain, "just know one thing. I will never hide behind you, or use your pain to clean my conscience." Rosa's breath left her in a shudder. Her babies stirred. Her heart warred between fury and something dangerously near forgiveness. May stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. "This town's heard enough for one night. Folks deserve time to decide what truth they believe." But the truth wasn't done ripping open. A voice from the crowd called out, "Eli Hart was there the day Briggs threatened the Morales land. I saw it. Mateo told me himself." Heads turned, voices rose, a tide of old buried stories surged up, and for the first time, the town wasn't swallowing Briggs' word whole. The storm wasn't only in the sky anymore, it was in the people, in their doubts, and in the space between Rosa and Eli. A space now filled with truth too big to ignore. The square went from stunned silence to something electric. A pressure in the air like the moment before a stampede breaks. Briggs felt it first. He saw the shift, the doubt flickering behind the eyes of townspeople who once worshipped him. The sideways glances, the whispered, "Maybe Eli ain't lying." The realization that his grip wasn't iron anymore. Fear twisted his face into something sharp and desperate men do stupid, violent things. Briggs lunged, not at Eli, not at May. He lunged toward Rosa. Before anyone understood what was happening, Briggs ripped Isabel, the smallest, lightest, from her mother's arms. Rosa screamed. "No!" Isabel cried out as Briggs hauled her up the courthouse steps, one arm around her tiny torso, the other yanking a revolver from his coat. May drew her gun instantly. "Drop the child, Briggs." But Isabel's terrified wailing made her hesitate. One wrong shot, one wrong twitch. Briggs knew it. He pressed the gun to the back of the little girl's head. Half the crowd gasped. The other half backed away in horror. Rosa collapsed to her knees, arms outstretched. "Please, por favor, she's just a baby," Briggs snarled. "Shut up!" He dragged Isabel higher onto the steps, using her trembling body as a shield. Rain streamed down his face, but it didn't wash off the madness. "You people think you know truth?" he shouted, voice cracking. "You think he pointed the gun barrel toward Eli, tells the truth? He's a nothin', a broken rancher, a drunk, a coward." Eli stepped forward, palms raised, voice calm but shaking inside. "Briggs, let the girl go. You're making this worse." "Oh, I'll make it worse," Briggs hissed. "I'll make it unforgettable." He jerked Isabel closer, and the baby cried harder, hoarse, terrified little sobs that stabbed through the square. Rosa sobbed openly now. May grabbed her shoulders to keep her from charging blindly into danger. Briggs scanned the crowd wildly. "I built this town. I paid for your wells, your church, your livelihoods. None of you'd have a place to sleep without me." But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. Shame, fear, and old guilt flickered across familiar faces. A woman in the front, thin, bonnet-soaked, eyes rimmed red, took one trembling step forward. It was Mrs. Alderton, the same woman who'd once shouted amen as Rosa was shamed. Her voice quivered. "Sterling, let the child go." Briggs barked a harsh laugh. "Don't pretend you're better than me. You all let me do it. You wanted me to do it, so don't start growing spines now." The words hit the crowd like a slap. Something inside them cracked, and Eli saw it. The moment Redemption Gulch realized they had blood on their own hands, too. Eli stepped forward again, slow and steady. He held nothing but the old iron lantern Rosa had blown out earlier. The same lantern he'd brought down the mountain, now lit, flame trembling inside the glass. "Briggs," Eli said softly. "Look at me." Briggs lifted his gun an inch. Eli took one more step. "Years ago, I stood there and let you destroy a family." His voice didn't shake. It carried. It cut. "But this time, if there's blood spilled, it'll be mine. Not hers. Not the child's." Rosa's breath caught. Even Briggs faltered for a heartbeat. And then a second voice rang out. "Put the girl down, Briggs!" A pistol cocked loudly behind the crowd. Heads turned. It was the Irish miner, Danny O'Rourke. The same man Briggs had fired last winter for speaking up about safety conditions. He stood tall now, one arm braced, gun trained steadily on Briggs. "I lost a brother in that mine, too," Danny growled, "and I've been swallowing it for years. No more." Beside him, unbelievably, Mrs. Alderton lifted her own pistol, hands shaking but aimed squarely. "We all sinned," she said, voice cracking. "I won't let you add another." A rumble of agreement swept the square. People who'd stayed silent too long, mothers, miners, ranchers, raised rifles, pistols, or simply stood between Briggs and Rosa, not as a mob, but as a reckoning. Briggs panicked. "Get back!" he shouted, tightening his grip on Isabel. "I swear I will shoot!" He never got the chance, because Rosa Morales, tiny, exhausted, soaked to the bone, picked up a stone from the ground, and with a cry ripped straight from her soul, she hurled it. It cracked against Briggs's wrist. He yelled, gun clattering against the stone steps. Isabel slipped from his arm. May fired. One clean shot to his shoulder. Briggs spun, stumbled, and crashed onto the steps, clutching the wound. Danny and two ranchers tackled the hired guns who reached for weapons. Others kicked their pistols aside. The square erupted, not in chaos, but in relief. Eli sprinted up the steps and caught Isabel from rolling down. The baby wailed, but she was alive, whole, untouched except for terror. He cradled her against his chest, whispering, "You're okay. I got you. I got you." Rosa sobbed and ran to them, collapsing around her daughter, hands shaking uncontrollably as she kissed Isabel's hair. May stomped up the steps, slapped irons on Briggs's wrists, and read him his rights in a voice like thunder. Crowds surrounded Rosa and Eli, not touching, just standing close, protective, repentant. For the first time in her life, Rosa wasn't the woman they watched to judge. She was the woman they watched to guard. Isabel clung to Eli's shirt. Rosa clung to her daughter and looked at Eli, and something in her gaze had changed. Not forgiveness, not yet, but truth. He had stood between her family and death, not as payment, not as penance, but as choice. For the first time, Rosa saw that the man who broke her heart and the man who saved her child were the same man, but maybe not the same man he used to be. The storm in the sky eased, the storm in the town broke, but the storm between Rosa and Eli was only just settling into something new. The square emptied slow as cooling embers. Lanterns flickered in puddles. Doors shut one by one. May led Briggs away in chains, and the townsfolk trickled off in stunned silence, like a congregation dismissed after witnessing a miracle they didn't quite believe in. Then there were only two people left at the center of the storm, Rosa Morales and Eli Hart, and three trembling babies caught between them. Isabel still clung to Eli's torn shirt, her tiny fists locking in the fabric as if he were the last warm thing in a cold world. Rosa reached for her daughter with shaking hands. "Give her to me," she whispered. Eli obeyed instantly. Isabel whimpered as she changed arms, but Rosa gathered all three girls close, pressing kisses to their damp heads. It grounded her. It steadied her enough to finally lift her gaze. Eli stood a few feet away, soaked, bruised, and still bleeding at the temple. But the real wound was in his eyes, bare, unprotected, waiting for whatever she would say. Rosa drew a harsh breath. "You came," she said. He blinked. "Of course I did." "You didn't have to." Her voice trembled. "You could have stayed at the ranch. Could have let Briggs take us. Could have hidden behind your past." "I'm done hiding," Eli murmured. Her throat tightened. "You already lived with choices you couldn't bear. Why take on ours?" His jaw worked. "Because I'd rather die than watch you face him alone." The words punched through her anger, landing somewhere she didn't want them to reach. But she forced herself to speak the truth she had left. "I don't forgive you," she said. Eli nodded immediately. No flinch, no defense, just quiet acceptance. "I know. And I don't know if I ever will." He swallowed. "You don't owe me forgiveness." Rosa looked at her daughters, safe now, alive because of him, and the storm inside her loosened by a thread. "But I'm not running," she whispered. Eli's breath hitched. She stepped closer. Not all the way. Just enough that the space between them wasn't a canyon anymore. "You hurt me more than anyone," she said softly. "But tonight, you protected what's left of my family. You stood in front of a gun for a child who isn't yours." Eli's voice cracked. "She doesn't need to be mine to matter." Rosa hesitated, then placed her hand on the old lantern sitting beside him. The same lantern she had blown out before leaving Heart's Hollow. The flame inside it now glowed steady, warm. Slowly she slid her hand until it brushed his. Not forgiveness, not surrender, just truth. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said, "but I'm ready to stop running." Eli closed his eyes, relief shaking through him. "Then I'll walk at your pace, whatever it is." Rosa gathered the babies more securely. "Take us somewhere warm." Eli nodded, gentle, careful, as if afraid sudden movement might break the fragile peace between them. He didn't take her hand. He simply walked beside her as she stepped off the courthouse stairs. Not leading, not following, just staying. And for the first time since the desert, Rosa didn't feel alone in the dark. The square emptied slow as cooling embers. Lanterns flickered in puddles. Doors shut one by one. May led Briggs away in chains, and the townsfolk trickled off in stunned silence, like a congregation dismissed after witnessing a miracle they didn't quite believe in. Then there were only two people left at the center of the storm, Rosa Morales and Eli Hart, and three trembling babies caught between them. Isabel still clung to Eli's torn shirt, her tiny fists locking in the fabric as if he were the last warm thing in a cold world. Rosa reached for her daughter with shaking hands. "Give her to me," she whispered. Eli obeyed instantly. Isabel whimpered as she changed arms, but Rosa gathered all three girls close, pressing kisses to their damp heads. It grounded her. It steadied her enough to finally lift her gaze. Eli stood a few feet away, soaked, bruised, and still bleeding at the temple. But the real wound was in his eyes, bare, unprotected, waiting for whatever she would say. Rosa drew a harsh breath. "You came," she said. He blinked. "Of course I did." "You didn't have to." Her voice trembled. "You could have stayed at the ranch. Could have let Briggs take us. Could have hidden behind your past." I'm done hiding, Eli murmured. Her throat tightened. You already lived with choices you couldn't bear. Why take on ours? His jaw worked. Because I'd rather die than watch you face him alone. The words punched through her anger, landing somewhere she didn't want them to reach, but she forced herself to speak the truth she had left. I don't forgive you, she said. Eli nodded immediately. No flinch, no defense, just quiet acceptance. I know, and I don't know if I ever will. He swallowed. You don't owe me forgiveness. Rosa looked at her daughters, safe now, alive because of him, and the storm inside her loosened by a thread. But I'm not running, she whispered. Eli's breath hitched. She stepped closer, not all the way, just enough that the space between them wasn't a canyon anymore. You hurt me more than anyone, she said softly. But tonight, you protected what's left of my family. You stood in front of a gun for a child who isn't yours. Eli's voice cracked. She doesn't need to be mine to matter. Rosa hesitated, then placed her hand on the old lantern sitting beside him, the same lantern she had blown out before leaving Heart's Hollow. The flame inside it now glowed steady, warm. Slowly, she slid her hand until it brushed his. Not forgiveness, not surrender, just truth. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said, but I'm ready to stop running. Eli closed his eyes, relief shaking through him. Then I'll walk at your pace, whatever it is. Rosa gathered the babies more securely. Take us somewhere warm. Eli nodded, gentle, careful, as if afraid sudden movement might break the fragile peace between them. He didn't take her hand. He simply walked beside her as she stepped off the courthouse stairs. Not leading, not following, just staying. And for the first time since the desert, Rosa didn't feel alone in the dark. The hearing took place in the cramped hall behind the sheriff's office. No judge's bench, no fancy chambers, just a long table, a kerosene lamp, and half the town squeezed shoulder to shoulder. The air smelled of dust, ink, and the tension of people realizing they might have been wrong for a very long time. Sheriff May Collins stood at the front, documents stacked beneath her palm. This town's lived under one man's thumb long enough, she said. Tonight we set the record straight. Rosa held her daughters in the last row, Eli standing a respectful distance behind her, not touching, not assuming a place that wasn't his yet. But he was there, present, solid. May read the evidence aloud. The falsified mine report, the missing wages, Briggs' private ledgers showing years of water extortion. Gasps rippled through the crowd when she laid out the final sheet, Eli Hart's signature on the old cover-up. Eli stepped forward before May said a word. That signature's mine, he said, voice steady. I let a man die in silence, and I kept that silence for too damn long. So whatever penalty comes, I'll take it. Rosa swallowed hard. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the honesty mattered. It changed the room. The miners backed his testimony. A few churchwomen admitted Briggs had forced their statements. Once the wall cracked, truth flooded fast. By the end, the council stripped Sterling Briggs of land rights, water control, and influence. The mine would be investigated. Water rerouted to both the Morales acreage and Heart's Hollow. And Eli, at his own request, paid a fine and ceded a strip of pasture he said he had no right to hold in the first place. When the meeting adjourned, the town didn't cheer. But they didn't look away from Rosa anymore either. Some nodded, some murmured, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, Rosa believed they meant it. Eli walked beside her as they stepped into the cool night air. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but finally, moving forward. 3 years passed, soft as dust on saddle leather, long enough for scars to fade, but not disappear. Long enough for strangers to become family, and long enough for Hearts Hollow to earn a new name. Lantern Creek. Folks in Redemption Gulch swore the place glowed at night, sometimes faint, sometimes bright, like a promise you could see from halfway down the ridge. Riders said the lantern hanging on the old porch never went dark, even in the worst wind. No one knew the truth. Isabel lit it every night. The little girl climbed the porch rail, tongue caught between her teeth, striking the match with her mother's steadying hand behind her. Rosa always pretended not to watch nervously. Eli always watched from the shadows of the barn, heart too full to speak. The light became a rumor, then a comfort, then a story. And before long, the name Lantern Creek stuck to the land like dew. The ranch had grown, not in size but in warmth. A shallow creek, dug by volunteers after Briggs fell from power, now cut softly through the front yard. It was clear and gentle, catching the late sun like a ribbon of melted gold. Children liked to step in it. Women liked to sit by it. Travelers liked to wash the dust from their hands and faces and say it tasted like forgiveness. Lucia said the water hummed. Marisol painted it twice a week on the barn wall. Isabel threw pebbles into it and said each splash was good luck. Inside the cabin, Rosa worked her small miracles: fresh bread, warm broth, clean blankets, and the kind of welcome people rarely found in mining towns. She never asked someone why they'd come. She simply set an extra place at the table. Some guests were widows with no more home to return to. Some were miners fleeing the old world Briggs built. Some were children no one claimed. Eli added bunks, built stables, expanded the smokehouse. Rosa added books, slates, and chalk. Lantern Creek became a crossroads for those who had nowhere else to stand. One late spring evening, Rosa kneaded dough in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming a tune her mother once sang in Spanish. Isabel chopped carrots like she was preparing supper for the governor himself. Through the window, Lucia fed the chickens, and Marisol painted a bright gold lantern on the barn wall. Eli leaned on the doorway, arms crossed, watching them with a quiet awe he still hadn't outgrown. Sometimes, lying awake at night, he still felt the weight of old choices pressing on his chest. The signature he'd given Briggs, the silence he'd kept, the man he used to be. But every morning, he found Rosa humming, or Lucia tugging his sleeve, or Marisol climbing onto his knee with a brush dripping paint, or Isabel handing him a reading book and saying, "Daddy," again. Daddy. He never thought he'd earn that word. Some days he still didn't feel like he had. But they gave it anyway. And he tried every day to be the man they believed he could be. At sunset, Rosa stepped outside, dusting flour from her hands. The porch boards creaked as she leaned into Eli's side. The lantern above them flickered in the warm wind. "Busy day?" he murmured. "3 new families," she said. "A miner, 2 widows. They want lessons for their kids. You okay teaching that many?" She glanced toward the yard where her daughters chased fireflies. "Once all I wanted was to hide. Now I want the opposite. I want people to see us, really see us." Eli nodded slowly, as if those words stitched something inside him back together. "And us?" he asked. Rosa looked at him. Full, soft, steady. A woman who had forgiven the land, forgiven herself, and was learning, bit by bit, to forgive him. "We're good," she said. "Better than good most days." He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. She slipped her hand into his, fingers weaving like thread through fabric worn but strong. "I don't forget the past," she whispered. "But I don't live there anymore." He bowed his head, touching his forehead to her hair. "Neither do I." Just then, Isabel shouted from the creek bank, "Mama, Daddy, look, fireflies on the water!" The girls' laughter rose into the golden evening air. Little lights danced over the creek's surface, turning the shallow stream into a glowing pathway. Rosa squeezed Eli's hand. "You know," she said softly, "people always said I brought trouble." He kissed the top of her head. "Maybe, but trouble never looked this beautiful." They walked toward their girls, hand in hand, step in step, and above them, the lantern glowed strong and steady, a little dented, a little crooked, but fiercely, stubbornly alive. A light that had survived storms, lies, exile, death, and shame. A light that refused to die. A light for anyone still wandering in the dark. A light called home. Cha and that, dear friends, is the story of Rosa Morales, Eli Hart, and the light that refused to go out on Lantern Creek. A story of second chances, of choosing kindness when the world turns cold, and of how family is sometimes found in the most unexpected places. If this tale touched your heart, even just a little, I hope you'll take a moment to share your thoughts below. I read every single comment, and I treasure hearing your memories, your reflections, and the wisdom you've gathered over the years. If you enjoyed this journey back into the frontier, where courage was quiet and love was steady, please consider giving this video a like. It helps keep these stories alive and allows more folks to find them. And if you'd like to join me again for the next tale of hope, healing, and Western grit, feel free to subscribe and tap that little bell. I promise there are many more stories waiting by the fire. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. Take good care of yourselves, and may a warm light always guide your way home.